Indeed, talking about a very important issue, social anxiety disorder or social phobia, which is a condition in which a person has an excessive or unreasonable fear of social situation, and it results in intense nervousness and self-consciousness that arise from a fear of being closely watched, judged, and maybe criticized by others. Now, given our modern-day living and social media lifestyles, human beings are spending a lot more time being watched, and this may be impacting on our social well-being. Now, we have Professor Stefan Hofmann from the University of Boston here with us to tell us more about social phobia and give us some advice on how sufferers out there can get some help. Professor, thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. So, I think a lot of people might not even know that they have this problem because it's a weird thing to contemplate, social phobia. How is this disorder expressed, and what are some of the telltale signs?
So social anxiety disorder is not simply being shy. It is an excessive fear of being criticized, being embarrassed, being in social contact. And people with social anxiety disorder often live very isolated lives. It's highly associated, highly comorbid with depression. About 30% of people also suffer from depression. They can't do what they otherwise would do if they didn't have this problem. So they live often single lives, don't have a lot of friends, their peer group is very limited, they don't make career choices they would otherwise make if they did not have this problem.
And is the existence of social media, the fact that we are always connected, whether it be through smartphone or your computer, is that aggravating the situation for those who suffer from it?
Yes, it absolutely can. It sort of gives an excuse not to interact directly with individuals. In fact, people with social anxiety disorder are using the internet, but they have problems on Facebook and so forth, but Twitter, but they have problems then still going out and meeting people one-to-one and going to parties or social gatherings. So the isolation is in a way accentuated because you still stay away from direct personal contact.
Now, in your time here, you've been spending some time with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and you've been speaking on a field that you are expert in, CBT, or as it is called, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. What exactly is that?
So CBT is a group of treatments, a group of psychotherapies that are short-term, that typically last from 12 to 16 sessions, typically each session about 1 hour, focusing on the here and now, on ways to improve people's lives by changing thought process and behaviors that are not helpful.
Yes.
And finding also other coping strategies to improve emotional lives. It has been found to be very effective for a large number of different disorders in randomized controlled trials. CBT has shown to be consistently at least as good as the best medication that is out there.
Yeah. So with the medication and the treatment sometimes being so expensive for mental disorders, how can we get more help? How can those that suffer get help?
I think it's important to generally destigmatize mental disorders.
Yes.
Often people don't like to admit to themselves and to others that they have a problem because it's often perceived as a personal weakness, as something that one has to overcome. But in fact, mental disorders are real. They impose enormous suffering to oneself, but also inflict high financial costs to society as well.
Yes.
So I think it's important to speak out and to approach your GP and say, look, I have an emotional problem and I need adequate care.
And also, I think maybe from a support system base, those that know of victims of mental disorder should maybe approach the situation with a bit more understanding then.
Absolutely. There has to be a general shift in mindset, really, and people like organizations like SADC are, for that reason, very important to hone in on the problem.
Yeah. And I think you were mentioning something very, very important, which I think it is important to highlight while you were interacting with the group, finding that perhaps mental illness is stigmatized, especially more so in Africa, because of sometimes cultural law that dictates that maybe that person is unwell because of some or other occurrence, when it's actually just a mental disorder, right?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Yeah. So would you say that that's maybe a starting point for us here in South Africa, maybe Africa?
It's a critical starting point. I think if enough people speak out, we can also change government policies and put things in motion to improve the situation.
Yes.
A very large rollout of CBT is currently occurring in the UK, where one of the last policies, implementations that Tony Blair did before he left office was to train many thousands, some 5,000 CBT clinicians in order to improve access to psychological care. And it has this particular initiative has already saved UK $700 million.
Wow.
Pounds. Sorry,
my
yes.
goodness, my goodness. Well, thank you very much, Professor, for sharing your time and your knowledge here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Professor Stefan Hofmann from the University of Boston talking to us about social phobias and mental disorders, a very, very important issue to engage in. But right now, let's find out what is coming up in the rest of your Feel Good Morning this morning with Leigh-Anne.